last time I talked to you about some tips and tricks to how you can learn any language quickly and effectively based on my teaching experience and also based on my own personal learning experience. So today what I'm going to do is talk to you more in detail about how I learned Mandarin from scratch, and basically how I became fluent and how I am now able to communicate with people who speak Mandarin, and also I'm able to even teach a language now using Mandarin. Right, so first off, I'm going to give you a little background history about myself. Growing up, I was very into watching like ancient costume dramas, like Chinese ancient costume dramas. And my mother tongue was Cantonese, so I watched these in like Cantonese because these were all Hong Kong costume dramas. So when I grew up, I kind of broadened my taste. So like I started watching more like Chinese ones, actually from mainland China. And I started watching like not just so what I used to watch was this genre called wuxia or mohab dramas, which is basically set in there is a little bit of a historical backdrop to it, but mostly they're about martial arts and learning martial arts, and you always have like this hero. Basically that's what wuxia stands for. Wu is like martial arts and xia is hero. So it's kind of like Marvel superhero movies. As in, like, you get this hero, and then they're skilled in martial arts, and they have these like magical powers and stuff as well that aids their fighting skills. Then I broadened that, and I started watching some there's another genre called xianxia or xinhapei, which is more like kind of like about celestial beings and like spiritual stuff, and it's kind of like more fantastical, if that makes sense. But you always have that kind of like hero, because you got xianxia, and the xia means hero. And then like in my kind of early teens, I became interested in history. So I watched things with a full historical backdrop. So like we're kind of edging away from this kind of like mystical, fantastical thing, and we've got history. So I was particularly interested in like Tang history, like Tang Dynasty history. So I watched there's like this TVB Hong Kong drama that was actually set in the Tang Dynasty. Actually no, not Tang Dynasty, it was the Sui Dynasty actually. And then it was talking about the uprising of the first emperor of Tang, and then how they overthrew the Sui emperor and how he was like tyrannical, blah blah blah. And then I watched a lot like about Wu Zetian, the only empress ever in Chinese history, and just lots of like historical stuff. And I've watched something like based in the Ming and the Yuan and the Song. Basically I've just kind of up to this point in my current point in life, I've watched a lot of like dramas with a historical backdrop. So I started watching. So obviously there's a limit to how much I can watch in in terms of Hong Kong films. So I started expanding into like watching Chinese ones, like mainland Chinese ones. And obviously these were Mandarins back then, there were no like dubs and stuff, and also just I'm not a fan of dubs. So I began like linking bits of Cantonese that I already knew to the Mandarin that I was hearing. I thought it was like quite cool, right? And I became hooked quite quickly because of how similar some of the words were in like Mandarin. And knowing that Mandarin is also a very important language, I also thought it sounded so cool and stuff. So I started watching more Mandarin shows. And I watched not just films, I watched modern day films as well. I started watching variety shows and some reality shows to kind of pick up more modern day language. And I find myself kind of subconsciously repeating the things that the actors and actresses say, the characters, and then kind of picking it up basically. So that's kind of the start of my Mandarin journey. So it all began with my interest in Mandarin content. And then next up we was informal learning. So I started learning it informally. So online back then, there were lots of YouTube courses that were free, and I started taking those, and then I would start learning how to write, how to read. I actually laid out quite a nice comprehensive studying plan. I had this kind of one YouTube channel, and it was more like a website back then that I studied from. I had a notebook and everything, and then I was learning how to write. I was copying out stuff. And basically I was just really, really into it. So I was really interested. I was really passionate. And that's kind of the drive that took me through all the years. And then I got kind of busy at school, and I kind of stopped a little bit, but I still watched stuff, and I still picked it up in terms of speaking and also in terms of my listening as well, even though my writing kind of was a bit stagnant. I also like tried, because in Chinese, like, and for those who don't know, there's two writing systems. You have traditional and you have simplified. So I actually try to learn both at the same time, because simplified is easier to it's actually easy for me to remember how to write. Traditional for me, like, I just thought it was cooler. It was like really cool. Like really how like complicated. It's very beautiful, I'll say, traditional Chinese character. So yeah, so I kind of stopped taking that as seriously because of my studies, but I still, like, you know, on the side I was still studying. So if you remember when I was talking about in my last lesson, you have to, you know, find a way of enjoying yourself as well. So yeah, so watching dramas and watching films and watching shows was my way of enjoying the language and like the whole learning process. And then next, what I started doing was I started actively practicing the language. So I downloaded this language exchange app called HelloTalk. I actually saw it, I can't remember where I saw this app actually. I saw it on like a YouTube channel or somewhere like that, and they recommended it. So yeah, like what's great about HelloTalk was that I could talk to natives, and like there's like a tool on HelloTalk where people can correct you if you said something wrong. So basically, like I kind of like made a few, I guess, friends and language partners where I would talk to them in Chinese. So obviously, like I use a pinyin typing system, and I also kind of train my like character recognition skills. So like every time I type something wrong, the language partner could correct it, and then they would talk to me in English basically, and then I would, you know, correct that in English. There's a downside to HelloTalk. I'm not sure if it's kind of like better now, but when I was using it, and I'm talking to like almost 10 years ago, it was the one thing that I thought lacking was that you can't really practice just speaking and you're listening, because it's only just a typing, essentially just texting someone. So it's more like just typing. So it helped with my character recognition, right, and actually helped me read what the other person was typing to me sometimes. But you know, I'm not practicing my accent. I'm not like training my tones, and even though, you know, I speak Cantonese, but the tones in Cantonese and in Mandarin is very different. So like, yeah, so I wasn't very confident in speaking because, yeah, just simply because I wasn't used to it, you know, and I always felt like, oh, I want to mispronounce something. I was too scared to say anything, and also, like, I just didn't speak, right? I just kind of like read stuff. So yeah, although my listening did majority come from my like consumption of Chinese content, so my listening was okay. It's just my speaking was the weakest, and my other skills kind of like developed quite quickly, and my speaking was just kind of lagging behind. So, and then I started studying it for like seriously. So I started studying it for something called A levels. So in the UK we have something called A levels, and it's split into AS and AO2 levels. Well, back when I was studying, and like that's kind of like your pre-university examinations kind of thing. So like it's more like it's very academic based. So Chinese was an option, right? And I self-studied Chinese for my AS level exams, and what I found helpful was that there was actually a textbook that you can study through. There's a whole curriculum, there's a whole like spectrum that you can actually study, follow, and study. So I started doing that in my AS level, which is the first year of my A levels. So A levels 2 years, you got AS and A2. So I started self-studying for my AS level. So I actually went through the whole book, and I made sure to treat it like an actual class. So I would go to my library back at school, or even we had like a little like independent studying centre. So I would, like, you know, after I've done all my other homework, I would do my Chinese, and then I'd try to work through like a chapter in like a week or something, and I'll be practicing everything. So I self-studied that in my first year, and I actually managed to get like a grade B in my exam, which was like quite surprising, because considering that I self-studied. So yeah, and then in my second year I wanted to do even better, so I hired a private tutor, like face-to-face, and she was like amazing. She was a great teacher. So yeah, I studied more seriously. She actually kept track of my progress. You know, she made loads of homework, and you know, because it's great having someone who's there, like a native Chinese speaker, to, you know, correct me when I'm wrong, you know, and really encouraging me to speak. It was actually in that year that my vocab started like getting higher, because she can actually explain to me how certain words are used. And it was also when my speaking got like a lot better, because she made me speak more. So, you know, of course we actually spoke English as well, like in the class, but she really, really pushed me to speak Mandarin and more Mandarin. She'd get me to talk about my day, she'd get to talk about like things I've watched recently. So that is really when I started improving. And you know, she was there to also kind of fix my pronunciation. Yeah, so I hired a private tutor, and I had like 4 hours with her every week, so it was actually like just one block of 4 hours in like just a week. It's not ideal, but it's just because our timings, like we couldn't like line up our times, so we did like 4 hours, like a whole block of 4 hours a week. So that was fun. Yeah, And then after my A2 levels, I actually applied to study Chinese studies at university. So Chinese studies is actually very comprehensive. It's like, we do a very intensive language course, which covers like culture and everything as well. And then we also have like, you know, history, you got your arts, your literature, your film, your economics, your politics and everything. So basically covers like a really whole range. And it's not just China, we also did like China and also like East Asia as well, like in relation to Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and like it's like a whole very comprehensive like course. So yeah, so it's a very intensive Chinese language course, and I think by the time I got to university my level was already kind of like here, but the highest level, entry level you can apply for the course was like a level 2, which was like kind of there. So it was kind of like very basic stuff when I was studying, but there were like, you know, it's kind of good for me because there are some things I missed out in the beginner's level that that was actually useful. So yeah, so all in all I did get quite a lot, and there was a lot of chance you can practice speaking as well. So my professors were all native Chinese, and yeah, so they're just there to help you fix your pronunciation and so on. And then, as part of my university degree, I studied in Taiwan for, in my 3rd year. It was supposed to be for like a year, like a full academic year, which is like 9 months. But because of like pandemic times, because this was like at the very start of the pandemic, so I needed to take 6 months, which is 2 semesters. Actually worked out fine because my first semester I was in like the highest like group, and then second semester they actually created another higher group just for like my group of like class. And then after that, what happens is that they don't have anything higher than what I already did in second semester. So what would have happened is that I would have went back down 2 levels and had to retake that like 1 semester, which wasn't really worth it, honestly. So kind of worked out fine. So I did 2 semesters, which is really enough. So basically it was like a really intensive language course, and this was actually more suited to my level because it was actually more complicated. We learned more kind of like written language and like kind of language you would use in like the news. So I did a lot of like news studies and everything, and lots of like formal language. So that was kind of like the most advanced thing that you could learn as like in any language, like the news and formal language, and like how to write something in a formal piece of writing. So yeah, so I did that in Taipei, in Taiwan, at the NCCU, the National Chengchi University, which is the 国立政治大学. I forgot the name of it. So yeah, so it was very fun. It was much fun, and I just loved being in Taiwan, and just like it's very interesting an experience because it's very different to the UK, and you know, like I was forced to survive in a Mandarin speaking only environment, so that actually helps a lot of people actually when you're learning a language. Obviously if you have the chance to, that's why I always suggest that you should always go to that country to really immerse yourself in the environment, in the culture, in the language, and it just helps a lot because you're forced to use it, right? And you need to use that language. You can't go and settle for English or something you're comfortable with. You know, in class when you're discussing with your classmates, you know, the discussion's like interesting, but you can't express yourself, you just switch to using English. In Taiwan you can do that, and also because in my class we had a lot of different people, so it's not just people who are from English-speaking countries. So the only thing we could use to communicate was actually Mandarin, wasn't Chinese. So that helped me a lot, yeah, because like I literally had to think in Mandarin as well. So that was very, very helpful for me. So now finally I can communicate with others in Chinese. It's also interesting in Taiwan because it's different to the like mainland Chinese. So yeah, so I learned a lot of like these things. I learned how to communicate with people, so now I can talk to my friends in Chinese. I can understand them and they can understand me. Only thing is that there's a lot of slang that I'm not aware of because it's just really difficult to catch onto the slang. But yeah, like I'm slowly learning. Like I'm trying to watch a lot of like modern day stuff, like kind of like variety shows and stuff where I can grasp like a real reality, like how language is really used. So yeah, and then now I've gotten to the stage where I can actually teach English with Chinese, in Mandarin Chinese. I can explain to them English grammar, I can explain to them like parts of speech, and like sentence structures and everything. And yeah, so I find that right now I'm at a very comfortable place with my Chinese, and it was a very long process simply because I started out quite slow. So it wasn't like a proper formal learning journey, but that is basically my journey of how I learned Mandarin. So you can take this as an example, you can try. Obviously studying abroad is difficult. Like it's not possible for everybody. Because I was part of my university degree, so that's why I was able to go to Taiwan. But you know, just grasp every opportunity you get. You know, go out there, meet people. You know, don't be shy to practice, because that's what helps you improve, right? So hopefully that helped you a lot. Okay, so that's all I've got to talk to you about today. So thank you very much for watching as usual. Please like and please subscribe, and let me know if you have any comments and any feedback and what you want me to talk about next, right? So I'll see you next time. Bye!